So Darryl, I've heard something about this option W. What does that do for me? What's the benefits or the drawbacks of that particular material?
Tom, that's a great question. Option W is one of our options that we can include on EA series strain gauges and also WAs and WK series gauges. And option W is basically a pre-attached terminal. We take this terminal, slide it right up next to the edge of the strain gauge, and we jumper from the tabs of the gauge over to the terminal, and then we fully encapsulate the strain gauge and we cover up about maybe 25% of that terminal. So option W is a pre-attached terminal, very small high endurance leads, and an encapsulation that covers over the top of it.
So those jumper leads, they're made out of beryllium copper for the fatigue resistance.
Absolutely, absolutely. If you look at them closely, you'll see that they're in a small, almost a serpentine pattern to provide some strain relief. They're beryllium copper, so they have a good fatigue life. And oftentimes we find the option W is a very popular option for customers that are ordering our WA or WK series strain gauges. As you're aware, a standard WA or WK series gauge has small whisker leads that are about 3/4 of an inch long. And sometimes these leads can be a little challenging to handle and to solder. So we make that process a lot easier for these customers by adding the option W, and that takes away the whisker leads, puts on the little small jumper, and puts on the terminal and encapsulates it. Makes it much easier for the installer to get the gauge wired.
So does that make it possible for me to directly connect the instrument wire straight to the strain gauge rather than have that separate bondable terminal that's such a pain to work with?
Absolutely, absolutely. You could run a typical 26, 28, 30 gauge wire right to the option W, maybe even a little bit bigger depending on the size of the gauge and the size of the terminal that we add. But it does allow you to directly attach the leads as opposed to having to put on your own terminal and your own jumper leads.
So if I have a need to have directly connecting to the gauge and I don't want to have to use a separate bondable terminal, then an option W is a good choice.
Absolutely, absolutely. Again, it's very common on EA series gauges, WAs and WKs, where we help to eliminate one of the steps that normally you'd have to go through without that W. We do that for you.
Okay, now this option W, especially on say a WK gauge, doesn't that slightly reduce the fatigue life of that strain gauge?
That's an excellent question. And you will find when you add the option W that you get a small degradation of the fatigue life, and also you lower the operating temperature range. The reason for that is that we use a 570 solder to attach the leads on the WK gauges, so that'll lower your max temperature down to about 450 to 500 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay, so there's a little limitation in fatigue and a little limitation in temperature compared to a WK series gauge.
Correct. It's not much, a small amount, but you will see a small degradation, but typically the advantage of easing the installation outweighs that.
Very good. Thank you, Darryl.